I'm Josh Harris, and you're listening to Clear and Loud, a podcast about the ideas, stories, and voices that are shaping our world. If you, like me, geek out about personality tools like the Enneagram or Myers-Briggs, you need to listen to this podcast today. Because the one that we're talking about today, I think is one of my favorites. I think it's one of the most powerful assessment tools that I've ever encountered. It's mind-blowing. It's really, you're going to thank me that I introduced you to this. Okay, just remember who introduced you to traits. If you are someone who is building a company and needing to hire people, whether it's your company or whether you're in a managerial role and you're needing to sort through resumes and figure out where to place people, you need to listen to this podcast today. There is no bigger waste of time and money than hiring the wrong person. And there's nothing more frustrating than being a person in the wrong role. So everybody loses when we place people in the wrong jobs. It's discouraging, it's demotivating. And, we've all had experiences like this, whether we were hiring or whether we were being hired. The resume looks good, their personality is amazing. You hire them, you put them in place, and you just know it's not working. But maybe you don't have the language, the tools, the categories to be able to explain why someone's not a good fit. My guest today believes that when you measure the wrong qualities, you're going to keep putting people in the wrong roles. Mike Moreau is on a mission to fix today's broken hiring system. Though most of these pre-employment personality tests, they measure the wrong things, and the result is frustration for everybody: leadership, HR, management, the new hire. And Mike's company, which is called Traits.com, is built around this powerful psychometric assessment. It's a 15-minute test called the Traits Assessment. I've taken it. It's painless. It just asks you questions about yourself, but it predicts with crazy accuracy how a person works, how they'll fit into a specific role. And if it sounds like I'm fanboying, it's because I'm fanboying. I think this is an incredible tool that more companies should be using and should be benefiting from. So you're going to flipping love the Traits tool. Here's my interview with Mike. Mike Moreau, welcome to the podcast. So good to have you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Good to be here, Josh. Good to see you again.
I was thinking about the background of how I got to know you and became a fanboy for Traits. But your team came to us, to my company, Clear and Loud, to help with your messaging and your branding and so on. And I just, little disclaimer here, I love all of the people that I get to work with, but I don't interview them all on the podcast. This is not just like something that comes along with this. I am so excited to talk to you because I have become a real believer in what you guys do and the power of the tool that you use. So in the process of you kind of walking, me and our team through what Traits is all about, I took one of your 15-minute Traits assessments, and we then got on a call and you walked me through, Josh, here are your work traits. Here's how you approach things. Here's where you will do well. Here are the kinds of things you struggle with. And I was blown away by the accuracy of what you shared. And, I've done other personality assessments, But what was unique about the traits assessment is that it described how I work. It wasn't just, here's how you show up in life in general. It was my work behavior, my work traits, and I've told people this, scary accurate.
Hmm.
And we didn't know each other. You didn't know anything about my, work background or anything like that, but you kind of just like read my mail is how I felt as you described things. And it helped me see why I had struggled in different positions that I'd been in the past, why I excelled at other jobs. So the chance to get to be here and to talk with you, I just feel like, man, I want other people to know about the work you're doing and the incredible power of traits. So my first question is for people who have never heard of traits before. What is a psychometric assessment, and what is it that you measure with the traits assessment tool?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Josh. I appreciate you having me on here, and so excited to share more about what we do and what traits is. So, yeah, it's a psychometric assessment. Using statistical analysis to quantify human temperament. So. There are different psychometric tools that exist out there. An IQ tool would be a version of a psychometric
Hmm.
tool, measuring mechanical aptitude, measuring artistic aptitude, those types of things. But also measuring personality traits and behaviors would be another use
Right.
for psychometrics and different tools that are out there. And traits is one of the tools that's out there that was created by my partner years ago, and really trying to fill a hole in the marketplace that he thought existed.
Now, the way that you just described all that, I love, but it sounds really complicated. When you just walk through this test, like I said, it takes about 15 minutes. It's not complicated at all. It doesn't feel like you're taking a test in that sense, but it's incredible how that analysis is able to really be quite accurate in a person's tendencies and behavior.
Yeah, well, you filled it out. So it's describing how you describe yourself, and yeah, I always get the comment is it's so simple to go through,
Right.
and yet how do you pull out that kind of information? And that's really where some of the magic starts to come in with all of this, is really being able to build knowledge and experience around
Right.
how different traits show up in the world and how they do work.
Well, maybe just talk to me for a second about what a work trait is, and why it's important to understand when you're looking to hire someone and how they'll perform. What exactly is a work trait in your perspective?
Yeah, sure. Well, maybe a little bit of a difference between traits and behaviors. So,
Mm,
so traits we would sort of define as those enduring characteristics that are
mm,
always there inside of us, and so the things that really make us who we are, and what people get used to, what they become familiar with as they interact with us. And
mm,
so, as I interact with you, I'm not surprised to see you energetic and smiling and engaged in the conversation today. Why? Because that's what I see all the time when I'm engaging with
mm,
you, Josh. Is I always see those types of things that come out. Behaviors are more, how do we need to show up in the moment?
mm,
And so all of that disappears right now because Mike's talking, and so you're quiet now, and you're behaving in a different way, and everybody's got an ability to be able to behave in different ways in different circumstances. But if I said, okay, Josh, now you have to be quiet all day, you don't get to talk all day, you don't get then that's going to become pretty wearing on you. And so when we talk about work traits, it's really about trying to understand, well, what are an individual's traits?
yeah.
What are those enduring things that are going to show up ongoing over time, not just in a moment, but over time?
Mm.
And the more that we understand about them, the more that we understand about what kind of roles they can assume and be motivated in for longer periods of time.
Why is traits, or how would you describe the difference between traits and other tests that are out there? Because there's so many. I mean, we're kind of in an age where people love self-analysis, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram. There are dozens and dozens that are out there. How do you describe to people who say, well, I already know about all these other tools? What's unique about traits that it delivers?
Yeah. Almost to maybe divide them just in terms of the way that we look at it into two sort of categories or on either side of a scale. So, academic tools on one side,
Hmm.
what do they use in universities to go and study human temperament and behavior and really try and understand that? But you start having with academic tools, and psychologists, they want to maybe go in and study things like how neurotic we are. And when you bring neuroticism into the workplace, it's usually something that people don't like to be too self-divulging about, and not really an appropriate thing to be talking about in the
Right.
workplace. And then you have other tools on the other side of the spectrum, like the Myers-Briggs, where more so tools for gaining an understanding about somebody, or maybe
Mm.
a little bit more understanding, self-awareness tools that come through. But because you said Myers-Briggs or colors, it's sort of this. We divide people into quadrants or
Mm.
into different styles, and so if you say introverted, extroverted,
Hmm.
that's a little bit like trying to say, well, we're gonna divide the population into short and tall. You're either short or tall, and that's not the way that we're made.
Right.
There are varying degrees of all of that, and
Hmm.
and so where we've tried to fit in is really being able to get the validity and reliability of some of the academic tools,
Hmm.
but really being able to bring it into the workplace so that people really gain a better understanding about themselves, about the other people that they work with, measure that very, very accurately. But because we can get that accuracy of measurement, we can also start to understand how people show up in jobs and behave in consistent manners over time. And so it gives us much more opportunity to sort of dive a few layers deeper to understand people.
Powerful. I'm curious about your own experience with traits. When you first encountered it, I mean, obviously it wasn't developed by you. You are now leading this company. What was your first exposure and how did that impact you?
Yeah, it was really something. It may be a little bit like a lot of different assessments out there. You sort of go through them and you get some information back. You look through it, and there's the yeah, so what? It describes me, but yeah, so what? And so I met my partner, and when years and years ago, and he invited me to go through this little survey, and then I remember specifically sitting down in our boardroom and him pulling out my profile one day, sliding it across the table. This was before I was working for them, and he spent an hour and a half talking through 7 dots on a page
Mm.
and telling me things about myself that he should not have known. And I remember going back in my memory going, yeah, shoot, sitting in school, that's why that happened. That's why I would do
Mm.
those things. There it is. That, going to my first job. Yep, that's why that happened. That's why those things showed up. And so as I sort of worked myself through all sorts of different times in my life, I was just blown away. I thought two things. Number one, thank goodness my wife is not sitting here right now, because I don't think I'd get away with, or think that I'd be getting away with, half of the things that I think I might be trying to. And number two, I remember sitting there the whole time and going, why doesn't every manager in the world know this about their people?
Wow.
I think of the experience and sort of the introduction that you gave here, Josh, and I sort of think, what, if only people in your life had understood that about you
Mm.
at different points in your life, and said, Josh, I'm not going to try and force you into this and fix you to do these things that
Mm.
I need done inside of this job. I'm going to put you over here where we can take all of these things that you have some natural gifts in,
Mm.
and the abilities to be able to go and do these things. And I'm going to give you these sorts of initiatives and interesting things to take on and challenges to take on.
Mm.
If only so many of your managers knew that about you at different periods of your
Right.
life.
Well, you're getting at something that I think is really important, and that is a sense that the way that we evaluate people, the way that we measure people's abilities or fitness for certain roles, the way that we position people on teams and hire and so on is is a little broken, or maybe a lot broken.
Mhm.
When you think about the kind of normal approach, what do you see that's wrong, that you get excited about the traits assessment helping to fix?
I think so much of it is just this subjective way of trying to figure people out,
Mm,
and sort of the difference between if you and I are two managers looking at one employee. Detail oriented to you is something that's is very different when I think about detail orientation, and
mm,
so which one of us is right and where does this person work best, and really trying to understand all of that. I was talking with somebody that I hadn't spoken to today, and thought it would be a neat story to sort of bring in here, where they've got a position in their organization where they bring a significant amount of applicants through, and
mm,
in order to progress in their organization, you have to come in through this one role, but they have troubles because they do see underperformance that comes through.
hmm.
And so, and they see that both at that initial level, and they see it as they progress them through the organization. And I said, so what are you doing to capture information, some data about those people? Because you have resumes, but resumes aren't going to tell you whether somebody's going to perform in a position or not. And you have the interview and interview questions, and you figured out all of those things as best you can. But a lot of those don't sort of predict whether or not that person's going to be able to show up. A lot of times, somebody's attitude, how they show up, what they do, they said, the
Mm,
problems we run into is we just don't, we find that people aren't assertive enough in this job to be able to do what they need to do, or, aren't social enough, or
mm.
respond to emotionally in different situations. Like those are the performance issues that start to come in and show up. And I said, well, you have no data on any of the people
Yeah.
as they're coming through, so you don't know what works for you in different jobs and what doesn't work for you in different roles. And if you had more of that information, I think you'd be able to make better decisions down the road,
Mm,
to being able to bring people in and say this would actually be a really good fit inside of our organization, and we can actually see where that individual can go into different areas and be effective, and we can free ourselves all up from bringing people in that really aren't a good fit in
yeah.
the organization, where these types of characteristics just don't show up doing really well for us. A quick example, engineering organizations are
Mm,
typically very high on emotional control.
mm.
So when you bring in somebody in marketing, for example, that's very low on emotional containment, and you bring them into that environment, it's kind of like, all I want to do is engage people and talk with people and draw stuff out of you. And yet none of you ever want to do that.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting.
And it's just a cultural misfit that tends to happen. And with some data capture on some of this, with an ability to actually objectively measure traits in people, then I think we can equip ourselves to make better decisions over the long run.
What are some of the common mistakes that you see repeated frequently? I mean, like you share some of those examples, and you talk about how subjective the process of hiring is. What would be some of your most consistent pitfalls that you observe in teams that don't have a tool like this?
Yeah, well, I think belief in resumes would be one piece that always comes through.
Mm,
Look at what this person has done in all different stages of their life and how they've achieved success.
mm,
Um, Gut, I think, is another one that people often turn to. My gut tells me this, my gut tells me that, and one of the things that I often do in training is ask the question, how good are you at sizing up other people?
mm.
And of course, if I took the average through all of the years, it's probably about a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
And everybody thinks they're really good at this, but I think we're almost sort of better at, figuring out whether we can get along with other people.
Yeah.
And is this, is it through the few things that I see in terms of behaviors or body language? Am I going to be able,
Mhm.
in words that come out, am I going to be able to get along with this person? Almost more of the, if you're going to work for me, can we go out for a beer? And,
Right.
and can I work with you?
Mhm.
And so we jump right in on that candidate because it happened in one of my jobs, good resume, and hey, you play hockey? Oh, let's, there's something we can chat about. Let's, we was something we could talk about over a beer,
Right.
and ended up being hired into that role, and it wasn't a fit for me over the long run. Really wasn't a good position, and I felt that very, very quickly. So, and I know my employer did too.
Well, it's interesting because yeah, the the things that make you want to hang out with someone or just like, I don't know what the word is, you vibe with someone
Mm,
doesn't necessarily mean that they're bringing the types of abilities and traits that the role needs. I mean, I find that sometimes the people with the abilities that complement mine the most sometimes rub me the wrong way because they just see the world so differently, but I need them to see the world differently. I need them
yeah.
to approach it differently. So it makes so much sense that in the hiring process, we just revert to these, instinctual things, or this person is nice to be around. And we wouldn't really think about the actual needs of the job, or maybe we're just like constantly duplicating ourselves. Oh, this person is like me, they think like me, they'll be on my side, and you end up building a really lopsided organization.
Yeah, no disagreement there. I think it's trying to be more deliberate about the way you're bringing people into your organization by creating a better understanding of yourself
Yeah.
and your strengths and some of those areas where you have to work really hard in order to cover up some of those areas
Mhm.
as I sort of talk about. And boy, if there was only somebody here that could complement me to be able to take some of these things on and carry them further down the road, and then hopefully somebody to complement them to be able to take things
Mm.
further down the road, and so on and so forth. If you could start to build teams like that, you can take a look at, in university when you get put on different teams, and you can start to see the people that are maybe more visionary about the way that they think about things, and
Mm.
then some people that try and pull that to the ground a little bit more, and then you see the other ones that haven't said very much but are furiously taking notes along the way, and those are such great teams to be able to look at because
Yeah.
there's a complementary piece that happens that is important to be able to figure out how that should work in an organization so that we can benefit from it the most, so that we're not all the same.
Right. Right. That diversity of abilities and diversity of traits is so important. With the 7 traits, which I'd like to walk through in just a
Yeah.
second, um, but I think it's helpful to understand it's not about being like strong or weak necessarily in any of the 7 traits, or there's like, if you have these 3 traits, then you're going to be good in any role. How do you think about the kind of range that people can have on each of those, and what's the right way to think about that?
Yeah, well, if you think about range and which one is the bad trait to choose from? Well, sorry, Josh, there aren't any bad ones to choose from. But where do challenges start to show up?
Mm,
Well, when you take somebody and put them into a role that really is different from who they are naturally.
right. Right.
And that's you've heard me talk a little bit before about this idea of personality of jobs,
Mm,
personality of people.
yes. Which I think is such a incredible way of thinking that I've not heard in other places, but the idea that a job has certain qualities that to fit into it, you need to match. There needs to be a closer match of. So what is a job's personality? What does that mean?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's really it's trying to figure out. Okay, well, what kind of a job is this, and is this a job where I have to make decisions all by myself every day, and
Mm,
and need to assume a lot of risk and drive change, make decisions in my business. I'm an entrepreneur, and that's what I need to be doing every single day. Or, am I in a role where I need to ask my manager before I take step one, two, or three, or even
mm,
half? I
mhm.
need to go to my manager and make sure that this is okay. And so, what kind of a job is it? And so, two sort of options like that. One, let's think of an accounts payable position,
Mm,
where every day I come in and ask my manager what it is that I need to do and in what order. And another job called outside salesman, where my manager says, all I want you to do every day, Mike, is produce this number, and everything's going to be great. And they don't want me going and checking in all the time. And so, personality of a job, those are two wildly different personalities. And so I think the better you get at trying to figure out, okay, well, what are the actual degrees of behavior that we need to do this
yeah.
accounts payable job, and how's that different from somebody that would have to do outside sales as an example. And once you can define that, then you can far more accurately say, okay, well, how is Mike, how is Josh going to fit up against that
Right.
that job model, and which position would they fit better into, using two extremes as an example.
Exactly. Well, I think the fear that a lot of us have whenever there's any kind of assessment is I'm going to be found deficient. I'm not enough. And what I hear you saying is, no, when you measure these traits, it's not about saying, oh, entrepreneurial person, always the best, always hire that guy that doesn't need to ask questions. No, there are actually certain jobs where that, what could be a strength in another role is actually a liability. It's detrimental that person doesn't know how to consistently check in and ask questions and get the marching orders. So I think, to me, that's the thing that's so fascinating. I think it's so easy to take your own abilities. I'm thinking about someone that's in a managerial role and say, okay, because I have these qualities, because I have these traits, those are the good ones, so if I can find other people that have those, but certain roles require completely different traits. And if you don't match the personality of the person with the personality of the job, there's going to be a clash, and they could succeed in another role. That's the sad thing. I think so many of us get discouraged. We think, oh gosh, I'm a failure, but it was really just the wrong fit.
Yeah, it really is, and so sad to see that. Really, in my mind, so sad to see that, because it's not bad person, just not the right role that you're ultimately ending up in. And I think there's a lot of, we've all got our insecurities.
Yeah.
And when we become employed in organizations, we all want to show up and we all want to do well, and we don't want to say that we can't do that. We all want to take those pieces on, and sometimes that presses us into positions that can become quite uncomfortable. So I've had a number of people through the years, Josh, where we've gone and looked at an executive team, for example, and gotten all the results back, and I can see the people that are going through undue stress in some of those positions, and we've had people that, after going through something like this, have said, I'm actually going to resign from this organization.
Wow.
Because I couldn't put my finger on what it was that was creating so much tension and stress. I knew it was work, but I couldn't figure out why that was happening. I tried to implement different things. I tried to do different things to elevate myself to that role. And I finally, this has given me a different glimpse into who I am.
Right.
And the kind of roles that really make me happy and excite me and use my talents every day. So rather than just sort of being insecure about things and trying to achieve what I need to, it's, where can I really be happy and do the things that I'm really good at? And it's almost sort of, to some degree, a way of sort of unleashing people. And
I love that.
And getting to get into roles that really are in more suited to who they are.
This podcast is sponsored by the creative agency Clear and Loud. Whatever your business's product, service, or idea, we believe clarity changes everything. We help you clarify your strategy, your brand messaging, and your online content so that you reach the right audience and grow your business. If you're frustrated by an ineffective website, if your message is jumbled and confusing, and you're not getting the traction you want with your marketing, let's talk. Schedule a free 30-minute consultation by visiting clearandloud.com. Well, there's a certain narrative which can be quite inspiring, but it's just not always accurate. You can be, whoever you want to be. You can, whatever dream you have, you can pursue, and you can kind of bring that to the job front to say, well, if you just go after it, you can change your habits and change your behavior in all these different ways and really work and succeed. And if you don't, then you're not working hard enough. But what I hear you saying is there's a certain level with our work traits that if we keep trying to, fit the, the round peg into the square hole or whatever, that it's just going to be so frustrating. And it's not about, just gritting your teeth and trying harder. It's saying, no, there's something about the core of who I am that might not fit with a particular role. And that can be really hard to say, but it can be freeing.
It can be freeing as well. Yeah. It can really unlock people in a different way. And again, when you talk about stress in workplace, this can be one of those areas where that's absolutely what it is that
Mm,
creates all sorts of tensions. And I've seen it in health, in relationships, and
mm,
in marriages with kids, all sorts of areas like that this can start to roll into. And it's not that I would turn anybody away from going and putting a good effort in and building habits
sure.
and doing those types of things.
Yeah.
But if it's to do something that's really to be something that's really different than who you are, I
Mm,
think the biggest gift that we can get, and what we spend a lot of our life doing, is just trying to figure out where we fit in the world,
yeah.
and the kinds of roles, the kinds of things that are most stimulating to us, and where the world can get the most of our gifts. And the faster you can figure that out about yourself and about the people that are reporting to you, I think those are the really gifted, special, unique teams that can go out and accomplish some pretty amazing things.
That's so good. Well, let's talk about the seven traits. I want to kind of just give me the high points summary of each of these, why they matter, and how scoring differently on the range on the scale can affect the kinds of things that you're best suited for. So, do you mind just walking through each of the seven traits?
I'll see if I can zip through that in an efficient manner here as we
Okay.
go through. Yeah, so seven traits that we measure, they show up in everyone, and to some degree or another, you'll fit on one side of the scale or another. And again, we use scales as opposed to quadrants or either or type of environments. The first trait is assertiveness, and so somebody that's lower on assertiveness, naturally more accommodating, naturally going to look for more security in their lives, much more careful, and look at risk in a different way than a lot of others. And
Mm,
and so people that are lower on assertiveness really good at being able to figure out, how are we going to make sure that we're being careful about things, and including people in decisions, and making sure that we're assessing things in the right way. And then people that are high on assertiveness tend to be quicker to make decisions about things, quicker to press things, hold their opinions more strongly,
mm.
want to set a direction. And people that are in the middle, guess what, are some of both of those that start to come through. Sometimes I want to assert myself, sometimes I don't. It depends on the situation that I'm in. Sociability would be the next one down, and so further over to the right hand side, the more you get into more social, more talkative. I can think really effectively on my feet.
Mm.
I have this ability of being able to draw sociability out of other people, get the conversation started. People that are on the lower side of the scale, more analytical. I want to be able to get information, and to be able to see that information, let it marinate around in my mind a little bit more before I give more distinct tidbits
Mm.
of insight back to the project. And so I'm going to be more careful about that. I'm not just going to talk through things. I'm going to think through things.
Interesting. Well, and that's an example of where I can think, oh well, sociability is always a plus. Be more sociable, and that'll help you in any job. But you're saying there are certain jobs that actually benefit from the person having a lower score with sociability.
Yeah, yeah. I've got years ago I went to see my eye doctor, and get some new glasses, and I remember chatting with him, and every once in a while I do this when I see some behaviors that start to come out. But this guy was amazing. He was such a chatty guy, and like I'd never met him before. I went in, and oh my goodness, we have this great conversation, and we're yakking back and forth, and having a great old time. And he's measuring things up and doing everything that he needs to do to check my eyes out. And then I walked out of there at the end, and I went, I wonder. Sometimes people that are really high on sociability don't take as much time in the analytical things, like writing down accurately what Mike's prescription might be. And so I couldn't find I couldn't find any glasses over at his place, so I went over to another organization, and they said, "Okay, good, you picked your glasses out. Here's the prescription," and I almost fell over.
Oh gosh.
And because it was so far out of whack, and so more focus on the conversation than on
Interesting.
writing
Yeah.
things down. So when you hire an engineer into the organization to design the next bridge that you're building for the city, you see very quickly that
Yeah.
yes, there's actually a really important place for people that are lower on sociability to go and spend their time at, because
That's so
then the next
good.
time,
It's so true.
yeah. Yeah. So, anyways, the next trait that we measure is pace or patience. And so, people that fall on one side of the scale, more patient, more methodical about the way that they do things, going to be more comfortable in routine type of environments, and have this ability to be able to start something and work it through to completion.
Mm,
I can spend the time at this to make sure that it gets done. Uh, Further over to the other side of the scale, you have people that are naturally more impatient about the way that they do things. They tend to want to have more things on the go. They tend to want to bounce from one thing to the next to the next. They've got this great ability of being able to juggle lots of things at once, and where they really are important in a team is creating change because they like to
wow.
have that in their environment.
Yeah.
Detail orientation is the next one, and so the more detailed somebody is, not that they like details or are good at details necessarily, but they like more structure in their life.
Hmm.
So tell me, Josh, how do you want me to do that? Okay, when I do step one, then what does step two look like? Okay,
Mm,
now I understand step two. What would step three look like? Okay, good, I understand all of those. So going back to the engineer job, those are the people that I want to have extreme specialty, and they know how to put all of the pieces together.
yes.
They think about the implications of decisions that are going to be made, and what's going to be important for us to think about. What are the ripples that are going to be if we drop this rock in the water?
Right.
We need to be able to figure that out. And then lower detail orientation. So I sort of give Richard Branson as an example. Now, he's never answered one of my phone calls to actually go through this survey, but he's sort of my classic example. That's probably somebody that's pretty low on that characteristic.
This is the founder of like Virgin. Is that right?
You got it.
Yeah, the billionaire.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I run my businesses from an island. And what I like getting involved in are big problems. That's what's most exciting to me. So there's a problem with the airline industry.
Mm,
I think I can solve it. I'm going to go and create an airline that's different and that's unique and doesn't fit the mold, doesn't fit the model. And so again, you need both of those in
right.
organizations. You need all of those in organizations. The last three really quickly, behavioral adaptability. So how much I adapt myself in different situations as I come across them. And sometimes that's more important for a sales job as opposed to the engineering job that somebody, the ability to adjust to different situations and different people along the way. Emotiveness, so more logic oriented versus more heart oriented. I express my feelings, or I don't express them as quickly or feel them in the same way as people that might be on the opposite scale. And creativity, so not a measure of whether somebody can come up with a good idea or not, but the further somebody is over onto one side of the scale, the more traditional they're going to be. This is the way I've always done it. Why are you trying to change it on me, Josh? It works. And we need people like that inside of the organization because there's lots of processes that don't need a lot of tweaking along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side of the scale, people that are more curious about things. That's interesting, Josh. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. And they want to learn and adjust and adapt as time goes on. And you can see if I put somebody that's high on creativity into a job that doesn't require it, you can see where tension and stress is going to be able to start showing up very quickly between that person and the manager and the job. They're just not going to be motivated because they need to use that creativity and vice versa.
Incredible. Would you say that, not only does a job have a certain kind of personality, but even organizations, because of the specific mission they have a personality which is then reflected in a certain mix of the different kinds of traits they need?
Yeah, there certainly are. We do a few different things with our business, and it's maybe a little bit of what is unique about our tool as well, is that we're not 100% lock, stock, and barrel on just a psychometric instrument that we've built. But we also do some strategic planning and org design type of work that comes into our business. And so if you came in as an organization and said, we want to do some strategic planning with you, the first thing we do is run you through the trait survey. Because we want to understand who the different people are. Because once we see that, we'll be able to see, well, how does this group of executives look at change? How do they look at risk? How do they how strategic versus operational are they? How do they inject creativity into the things that they do every day? And where does culture start? Culture starts at the top and then drips down through the organization. And so it gives us some insight into how that organization looks at a few different things, and risk, change, engagement of the
Yeah.
people that they have around them, all those types of things, and then we see that show up all through their culture as well.
So you'll actually advise and consult like leadership teams or C-suite level leaders, have them go through traits and then basically help them to understand why they work well in certain ways or why there's tension in different areas.
It's the best place to do this, Josh, and it's really amazing to hear how when you're working with the executive team, if they understand this, if they develop it as a language, if they
Yeah.
talk about it on a regular day, and not just go, why isn't that person delivering results?
Mm,
Mr. or Mrs. VP, you need to go over there and just inject more pressure into that situation.
right.
It's a different type of environment where they'd say, okay, well, why isn't that working?
Mm,
Well, what are their traits?
mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Now we understand a little bit more about that person and why things. What can we do to team them up with somebody, or to remove or add some different kinds of responsibilities onto them because we understand that person in a different way, and so then they've got that ability to do that, and then it just again that language permeates through the organization, becomes important for that organization, as opposed to I'm a middle manager inside of the organization and I do it with my team, but it doesn't sort of move beyond that, and you don't get the full benefit of creating this language that really does help propel businesses to some pretty amazing heights.
That's so good. So the leadership team's not only able to work through their own relationships and structure, but it gives them this language to begin leading the whole company, positioning people better, and so on. That's so good.
Yeah, growth of organizations is entirely dependent on their people, and I think the more you know about your people and the way that they work and how to build teams and how to put those pieces together effectively, the more that the bigger and better places you're going to go, the more growth you're going to actually have, and the more high fives you'll share over time.
What about on the hiring front? And when a company comes to you, they have a role, whether they're going to have dozens or thousands of applicants, what does it look like for them to use the traits assessment tool? How does that working relationship, function when they bring traits in?
Yeah. Well, maybe as a bit of a starting point is really, as you think about it around hiring, it's I'm taking a job description for the position.
Mm-hmm.
It's bringing in the manager into the discussion, maybe somebody from HR, people that are familiar with, intimate with the position itself, so that you have a few different points to have some conversation, and then we'll get on a call with those people and ask questions about the job description, and ask questions about where does somebody go when they have a question about something. Well, they're expected to answer that question by themselves. Okay, good, got it. So we would pull apart that position and really try and understand different components of it that helps us to be able to go and establish what is the personality for this position, and how are they going to work with the manager, and where is this position in the organization. And that sets a benchmark that we can send back to that group and say, so what do you think? Does this describe the position? Is this what we're looking for here? And it's interesting. It's a conversation that people have where they very often walk away from that going, I've never thought about this position like this before.
Wow. Yeah.
I've never thought about it with these different components. And you've asked me questions that I haven't thought about before. And so we're that much more confident in what it is that we're actually looking for inside of this position. We've come to agreement with the different people that are in the room, and now we've got our benchmark. And then we would send that organization a link that they could send out to their applicants, and they can ask their applicants to actually go through the survey and describe themselves to us. And so we would ask them questions about the different traits, and they describe themselves to us as they go through. And then we take that information and we compare them against the job model and rank all of those candidates from best fit down to worst. And so when you and I apply for the accounts payable position, because we've got maybe some math that we did that would be relevant to apply to this situation, we end up down at the bottom of that list, not
Yeah,
because we
exactly.
intellectually can't do it, but because we just would not be motivated to do that for any sort of length of time. And so, best to move on to somebody else ultimately.
So when a company is using traits for hiring, you help them define the job's personality. So they're like, okay, this is what we need. And then they've got their own specific link for applicants to take the 15-minute assessment. They can get that advice from you of ranking. Let's say they have 100 people who apply. You look at that without any interviews yet, without even looking at resumes, and you're able to say, here are the 10 people you should definitely talk to first because they rank high in the ways that the job needs them to rank high.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. Quick story on that.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Years ago, I worked with an organization. This was just when we were doing some piloting in this new service that we were offering and using it for hiring. And so it was really neat because they said, Mike, we've got a pretty good process. And so we're going to go through all of the resumes of all of the applicants. This was for an administrative role in a university. And they said, we're going to go through all of this, but we're going to add this traits piece to it and see how things go. And I said, great. We established the job model. I went away into my corner and we started collecting some of the applicants, of which there were about 120. They took a look at all of those resumes. I met with them one day and I said, okay, so you've had a chance to look at all the resumes. Yes, Mike, we have. And I said, how long did that take you? And so they sort of asked around the room because they had a bit of a hiring committee around this. And they said, 12 hours.
Wow.
We've been looking at this for 12 hours. I said, great. Give me your list of candidates. I'm going to compare all of them against the job model and rank them. And so they had one candidate that was what we call a good candidate, not a bad fit. They were probably about 15 down from the top, 14 people that were better than that individual. And the rest of them were quite far down on that list. And I said, okay, let's take a look at them. And so we went down to the one that was at the bottom of the list and like they were completely different from a traits perspective to what we needed inside of the role. So they're very good at a good resume, but the motivations would be entirely different than what we needed, and then just different variations of that as we walked our way up. And so what I said was, let's go up to the top of the list and go and pull out that person's resume. So they pulled out the resume and they took a look at it and I said, okay, so are they qualified to do the job? And they said, yeah, actually, now that I look at this, one person said, yeah, when I looked at this, I didn't like the font.
Oh, gosh.
And I didn't like the way that this was organized and put together. And so like when you're looking at 120 resumes, we just find a reason to move on to the next one, right?
We get really superstitious and weird.
Yeah. This is not bad, Mike. And so good. Put him down for the interview. What about number two? Number two, okay, resume wasn't very good. I said, good, don't progress forward on that one.
Mm-hmm.
Number three. Number four. And so they actually came up with a list of 3 people that were very high on my list and 3 people that were very high on their list. And they went and interviewed all of them. And what did they say when they came out of it? They said, the people on our list, the risks that you talked about, Mike, were absolutely what we saw in the interview. And we're not progressing with any of them. We're going to progress with the person that was 3rd on the list.
Interesting.
Because she came in, we would have never, she was dismissed from our process.
She didn't stand in their process. Her resume didn't stand out. She would not have been on the interview list. Wow.
She was the one that they hired. And 3 years later, when I was working with that organization, that person was still there and doing that job. It's such a neat story to sort of talk about that idea of, some people maybe get pushed back a little bit against resume, but if you've got the traits to do a job, you're motivated to do that job, and your resume is maybe only a 6 out of 10 instead of a 9 out of 10, which most people look for. You can teach people what they need to do the job if they're smart. I can't change motivation. I can't take you and say, Josh, no, you have to be happy, engaged, excited every day to come to work and sit by yourself and not talk to anybody. We're going to be working for that on that forever.
Yeah. Wow. What do you say to a company that says, well, this sounds great, but we're not huge and the investment of bringing you in to help with hiring, we just can't justify it. We'll just, keep doing it, keep doing it ourselves. How would you convince them to consider using traits?
Probably the first person or question that I would ask is, how many times have you hired for this job over the last
Oh
year?
yeah, yeah. And what's the
And
what's the cost of hiring the wrong person?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and the wrong person can be somebody who, we find out in 2 weeks that person needs to turn over and needs to
Mm,
leave because they're not effective in the role, or 6 months or 12 months. That's all got a cost to it.
mm-hmm.
Or we hire somebody that's not quite bad enough to let go,
Yeah.
but is only doing 50 to 60% of the job.
Mm,
And so what is the cost to the organization of having somebody that really isn't providing what we need to inside of the organization, and we're just
mm.
not getting the productivity that we need to? We could talk about that cost month in
Yeah.
and month
Oh
out, and
boy.
it in my mind justifies the
Well,
number.
and the pain that's caused to the rest of the team when there isn't that fit, um, and the turmoil that's created is quite costly, quite costly. Um, so the ways that people can engage with traits, you've talked about how you work with leadership teams as they're working together, as they're shaping the culture of a whole company. You come in and do that kind of consulting. And then when people are hiring, when they have a specific role, you help them define the personality of the job, and then create the assessment so that they can really filter and rank people maybe in a way that they wouldn't without that kind of information. Um, if someone's just like, I want to take a step and, I want to learn more about this, I want to experience this, or even maybe someone who is in a role where they hire, but they're like, how do I test this, to really understand if it really works? How can they connect with traits and reach out to you?
Yeah, well, traits.com is the website that they can come to and check a little bit of that out, and we've got a few different things that they can go and explore on that website, and that's got direct lines into our organization.
Mm,
I love having conversations with people. I like running into people that are looking at trying to do something better, at being able to improve the way that their team is functioning together.
mm,
That position that they're hiring into is working. The dynamics of the organization. That's what we're really trying to do, is just help people to make improvements, to get better over time. And so, if you're ever somebody that's interested in having that kind of a conversation, I've got lots of time for people like that, and we in our organization do. It's the stuff that gets us excited and gets us engaged with working with different organizations. Maybe as a bit of a piece to that, it's the, who do we find that we've worked with through the years? If you look at the one consistent
mm,
factor, it's been companies that want to grow.
right.
If you don't want to grow, then performance effectiveness is not as important to you.
Mm,
Then those are organizations that we just don't tend to do as much work with. If you're engaged in growing and doing things better, then absolutely reach out to LinkedIn, on our Traits website. Multiple ways to get a hold of me.
fantastic. Mike, thank you so much for the conversation. I've benefited from traits personally. I've used it to create a hiring process for a project manager. The startup that I'm working with is embracing traits, and we've built this into our entire hiring process. It's just been so fun to see the effectiveness of that. Really grateful for the work that you do and the insight that you're sharing with so many people. Thanks for listening to the Clear and Loud podcast. I'm your host, Josh Harris. Our producer is Pam Cameron, and this episode contains music by Jeremy Yaddo at Music for Podcasts. If you like what you hear, give us a boost by subscribing or leaving a review on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen. We'd also love your feedback on today's episode. Or if you have a question you'd like addressed on a future episode or a guest you'd like us to consider, email us at hello@clearandloud.com. You can also shoot us a direct message on Instagram. Our handle is @clearandloud. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.